Jimmy had the kind of childhood most kids in Manchester shared: a football at his feet, mud on his knees, and the distant dream that one day he'd become good enough to impress, well, at least his own reflection. On this particular afternoon, the boy was playing football alone in his neighborhood, trying out dribbles that looked more like accidental dance moves than skillful tricks. Jimmy retreated to his small room. There, with all the seriousness of a boy studying for a final exam, he picked up a book on performance anxiety. He wanted to be a footballer, but at this rate, he was becoming an expert at only two things: kicking balls into fences and talking himself into panic attacks. The sound of a squeaky bicycle chain snapped him out of his spiral. His mom, Donna, had arrived home, riding with a wide grin plastered across her face and, oddly enough, a new boyfriend clinging to the handlebars like he was auditioning for a circus. Johnny was his name, though Jimmy's first thought was that he looked like the type of man who might sell counterfeit sunglasses at a motorway stop. Donna seemed thrilled, as if she'd just won the romantic lottery. She called for Jimmy to come down and meet her new man, practically glowing with excitement, his face making it clear he'd rather be forced to eat broccoli for a month than endure this moment. He sized Johnny up and couldn't understand what spell this strange man had cast over his mom. Johnny looked odd. Johnny, caught between bemusement and curiosity, found this revelation intriguing and began bragging about his fancy, expensive bike like it was the crown jewel of Manchester's transportation system. Jimmy's eyes glazed over instantly. Donna, eager to redirect, proudly told Johnny that Jimmy was a football fanatic. Johnny puffed out his chest and claimed he liked football too. Moments later, the man proved it by challenging Jimmy to a quick kickabout, only to knock him to the ground with all the grace of a rhino on roller skates. And Donna's face flashed with anger at Johnny's overly aggressive play. But Johnny insisted he hadn't realized Jimmy was so fragile. To make up for it, he began demonstrating kung fu stances in the middle of the street, promising to teach Jimmy how to toughen up. The sight of Johnny waving his arms like a budget martial artist was ridiculous enough to crack Jimmy's poker face, and he actually laughed. Johnny looked proud of himself for winning over Donna's son, if only briefly. Tea time quickly followed, with Johnny and Donna heading inside. Jimmy lingered outside, preferring the fresh air to his mom's new love interest. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. By the time he went in, Johnny was preparing to leave, and Donna chirped her goodbyes to him. Once Johnny was gone, Donna noticed the unimpressed storm clouds still parked on Jimmy's face. She reminded him that Johnny was funny, nice, and, most importantly, made her laugh. Jimmy said nothing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than groans. The next morning at school, Jimmy's mood hadn't improved. He crouched behind a parked car outside the gates, spying on the two school bullies who stood guard like feral security officers. Psycho and Gordon, two self-proclaimed Manchester United fanatics, were busy terrorizing anyone daring to wear the colors of rival clubs. Their current life mission? Making the existence of Manchester City fans as miserable as possible. Unfortunately, Jimmy happened to be one of the rare, unlucky City supporters in the school. His allegiance was practically a neon sign saying, "Please bully me." When the PE teacher, Eric, walked past, Gordon shouted a taunt about him soon losing his job. Eric considered firing back, but wisely chose to keep walking. That man had mastered the art of ignoring nonsense. During recess, Jimmy's attention shifted when he spotted a new girl, Sarah. She had the kind of smile that could brighten Manchester's rainiest day. To his delight, she flashed him a grin. For a moment, Jimmy floated, his stomach flipping in awkward happiness. But happiness never lasted long around bullies. Almost immediately, Gordon, Psycho, and their gang cornered Jimmy. He bolted like a rabbit, but his escape led him into a dead end, beating him up and marking their territory by urinating on his beloved Manchester City bag. Watching all this unfold through a bathroom window, Eric decided to do absolutely nothing. His silence said, "I don't get paid enough to play superhero." When the bullies left, Jimmy shuffled off to wash his soaked bag in the restroom. Wandering back through the school, he noticed a fresh announcement pinned on the board. Football team, trials later that day. His heart skipped. Maybe this was his chance. But paranoia struck, and Jimmy worried others might sign up too. In a desperate move, he covered the notice with another sheet of paper. Later, Jimmy arrived at the school field where a few players were already warming up. Among them was the goalkeeper, diving around with the enthusiasm of someone auditioning for a mattress commercial. Then Gordon and Psycho swaggered onto the field, spotting Jimmy. They sneered about him hiding the trial notice, but before fists could fly, Eric appeared. He explained they'd play a six-a-side game since only 12 students showed up. This secretly delighted Jimmy. His chances of playing had skyrocketed. Meanwhile, in the polished offices of the school, the headmaster sat with board members, deep in discussions about funding a new sports hall. Their hopes were dashed by budget shortages until Gordon's father, Ken, stormed in. He complained bitterly about the school's lack of sporting glory. Launching into an impromptu memoir, he bragged about reaching the final of the Manchester Schools Cup as a boy, which apparently earned him a brief shot with Crewe Alexandra. He puffed himself up like he was a legend. His solution? He'd donate a fortune for the sports hall, but only if the team reached the cup final again. The board nearly broke into applause. Back at the field, Gordon flaunted his skill, dribbling past everyone with smug arrogance. But his ego got the better of him when he blasted a ball straight into Jimmy's face. Jimmy collapsed, but ironically, the ball bounced into the net. Gordon cheered like he'd scored for England, but Eric disallowed the goal for dangerous play. Gordon protested, insulting Eric, who finally lost patience and told him to leave. Gordon refused, so Eric stormed off to the headmaster. In the office, Eric explained the situation, but the headmaster sided with Gordon. Ken then swaggered in, reinforcing the obvious. Gordon was untouchable because Daddy's money trumped discipline. Eric left, exasperated. Later, Gordon mocked him outside, with Ken calling his son the next Michael Owen. Eric didn't even blink. The man had mastered the ancient teacher's art of pretending not to hear parents' delusions. School ended, and Jimmy walked home, humming to himself. Embarrassingly, he began singing aloud. Unknown to him, Sarah was nearby and overheard, clapping at his surprisingly decent voice. Flustered, Jimmy panicked and bolted like someone had set off a fire alarm. That evening, Jimmy visited his mom's workplace, craving her attention. But Donna was drowning in tasks, leaving her boss to inform Jimmy she'd be staying late. Dejected, he trudged home, only to bump into Gordon and Psycho again. Predictably, they chased him, but this time fate intervened. An elderly woman named Alice pulled him into an abandoned, soon-to-be-demolished house. Alice's home was eerie, like the set of a ghost story. Jimmy regretted stepping inside until his eyes caught a pair of boots hanging in her room. Alice claimed she'd seen him practicing football alone and insisted the boots were special. Jimmy half-joked, asking if they were magical. Alice, with a twinkle in her eye, confirmed they were. Jimmy accepted them, though doubt clung to him like bad perfume. On the way home, skepticism took over. He hurled them into a waste dump. When he returned home, his mom's ex, Harry, was outside, begging forgiveness. Harry had been the one to take Jimmy to his first Manchester City game, but the small problem of being married at the time had doomed his romance with Donna. Jimmy brushed past, uninterested in adult soap operas. The following day, Jimmy's spirits lifted when he saw Sarah standing up to bullies. Soon after, the school football team prepared to leave for their match against Wreckingham. But disaster struck. Gordon rifled through Jimmy's bag and flung his boots into a passing garbage truck. Jimmy's heart plummeted. Remembering Alice's gift, he sprinted to retrieve the discarded pair from the dump. By the time he made it back, the bus was about to depart. Eric looked relieved when Jimmy climbed aboard, while Gordon glared like a cat denied cream. At Wreckingham, the pitch was in atrocious condition, resembling farmland more than a football field. The opposing players were rough, borderline criminals in shin pads. Gordon scored early, but Jimmy noticed Eric seemed oddly indifferent, as if emotionally detached from the game. When the referee later scored a goal himself, yes, scored, Jimmy nearly fainted from disbelief. As the match wound down, Gordon was badly fouled and couldn't continue. Eric reluctantly sent Jimmy in. Nervous but determined, Jimmy ended up clearing a ball so hard it accidentally soared into the opposing net from his own half. His teammates exploded in celebration. Jimmy had scored the winning goal. Gordon, sulking, looked like someone had stolen his pudding. Afterwards, Jimmy sought out Alice, proudly recounting his miraculous goal. Alice asked if he'd scored with the boots, and when Jimmy admitted he had, she revealed they once belonged to a Manchester City player named Robbie Brewer. Jimmy was stunned. Yet when he researched later, he couldn't find any mention of Robbie Brewer in the club's history. Days later, Sarah accompanied Jimmy to a cemetery, where she showed him Robbie Brewer's gravestone. This confirmed that Robbie had existed, but why no records at City? Jimmy vowed to dig deeper, literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, Harry was at the stadium, buying a program from a blind seller. At school, Jimmy decided to investigate further at City's ground. A cleaner, ironically a Manchester United fan, directed him to a nearby house. Shockingly, it belonged to Eric. Inside, Jimmy discovered Eric's past. He had played for City and once scored a hat trick against United. Eric admitted he'd lost his passion for the game since retiring, leaving Jimmy inspired but also frustrated at the wasted wisdom hidden in his teacher's silence. Time rolled forward, and the school faced tough opponents, including Northmore, a team so good people joked they were Brazil in disguise. Ken forced himself into coaching, demanding all passes go to Gordon. Predictably, the plan failed. At halftime, another coach recognized Eric, reminiscing about the day Eric scored a hat trick against him. The players begged for Eric to return as coach, and he led them to victory, with Jimmy scoring twice. From then on, Jimmy blossomed. He scored goals, his teammates rallied around him, and even Psycho warmed up to him. He became the star, and Sarah became his closest supporter. Harry also reappeared, now separated from his wife, giving Jimmy a father figure again. But Johnny remained a thorn. Eventually, Donna discovered Johnny had been stealing from her. When she caught him cheating, she threw him out for good. Harry slipped back into Donna's life, their chemistry reigniting like a forgotten fire. Meanwhile, Gordon's father continued scheming. Before the final, Ken tried to force Jimmy onto the bench so Gordon could shine in front of scouts. The headmaster initially caved, but backed down when the team threatened not to play without Jimmy. Furious, Gordon stole Jimmy's boots and hurled them into a canal. Jimmy was crushed. His magical boots were gone, and worse, Alice was found dead after freezing in her collapsing home. It felt like the world was falling apart. With his confidence shattered, he trudged into the final match and played poorly, his team trailing by 2 goals at halftime. That's when Harry stepped in. He reminded Jimmy that no boots, magical or otherwise, could create talent. Confidence had to come from within. Eric echoed this, sharing stories from his own career. Then came the revelation. The blind program seller at City Stadium was Robbie Brewer himself, Alice's son. Robbie explained that the boots weren't magical at all. Alice had bought them for him as a child when he was chosen as a mascot. The so-called magic was really just Jimmy's belief in himself. The truth hit Jimmy like a free kick to the chest. He didn't need magic. He needed faith in his own ability. In the second half, Jimmy came alive. He scored, assisted Gordon for the equalizer, and in the dying moments, led a counterattack. Stopping just short of the goal, he deliberately blasted the ball into Gordon's face, which ricocheted into the net. Victory. Sweet, ridiculous victory. The stadium erupted. Jimmy was carried by his teammates. Eric hugged him like a proud father, and Donna watched tearfully beside Harry, their love rekindled. Scouts came sniffing, offering Jimmy a chance at Manchester United, but Jimmy cheekily turned them down, declaring his heart belonged to Manchester City. Gordon sulked, Ken fumed, but the team celebrated. Sarah claimed Jimmy as her boyfriend, and he accepted with a smile that stretched wider than the Etihad. Jimmy had learned the most important lesson: no magical boots, no shortcuts. Just belief, hard work, and a little bit of cheeky luck. And maybe, just maybe, a football to the face could win a final. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this.